As a 7-year-old kid who only knew life as being the youngest in the family, being told that we were going to adopt a child, I was terrified at first, not knowing what to expect or what was going to happen. It was just a whirlwind. But once we got my sister and everything kind of fell into place, it was just plain sailing from there. International adoption has become more and more difficult over the most recent years. All around us, we see people who are trying or seeking to adopt a child, and it's just become more and more difficult for them to even understand why it's not working. So it's important for us to know what's going on. But today I'll be explaining the corruption and almost mechanized process that is international adoption. First, I'll explain the process. The first thing you need to know is the Hague Convention. Now, the Hague Convention, their goal is to stop abduction of children just to be sold into adoption. Because there's many countries that have been there's many countries that are just abducting kids to throw into adoption. And I'll talk about that later, but the Hague Partnerships is the next part. And I have a map right there. And those are all the countries that are part of Hague Partnerships. And if you can't tell, there's just not a lot in the middle of Africa. It's because they don't, that's where you hear most about the abductions and stuff like that. But those are the countries that follow the Hague protocols and rules and stuff. The next thing is all the paperwork. This is the part that people don't like to do because it's so menial and boring, and it takes years to get paperwork done. At least for us, it took years to get my sister. But you need an immigrant visa. You have to apply for the adoption first off, which you apply, and then it takes 6-7 months before they even get back to you. And then you have to have the Hague visas, and if you're in the US, you have to have citizenships and all that go with it. Next is the adoption bans. The US is just not liked by most countries for adoption for some reason. So there's a graph that shows in 2004, those are all the people that are getting adopted. And then it changed to 2015, and you can just see the distance in those. Those are just the hot spots that I'm going to talk about. Because there's only a couple countries that the US adopts from often. Guatemala is where my sister is from. And their adoption and how that works is just insanely awful. And that's the next part I'm going to talk about. But I do have a quote from somebody that is important for this. Catherine Joyce is the author of The Child Catchers. So one country closes and another country opens, and it just goes back and forth, and the hotspots just change. Because the US adopted 7,000 people from China, and then they started cutting down on all of the abductions and all that, and ended up being just 2,000 in 2015. Next I'm going to talk about Guatemala. Guatemala has just closed their adoption, period. They don't allow international adoption anymore because of how much abduction and all the crap that's going on there. Total, there's 29,000 children being adopted from Guatemala, and that's since 1999. And the US has just been pouring money. It's tens of thousands of dollars in fees for 2 kids. It's insane how much money that the agencies in Guatemala force people to pay. There's been a lot of underground trade with children there. It's a lot. But just to conclude, I talked about the Hague Convention, which talks about how the abduction of children and the network that you need there. Then I talked about the hotspots and how they switch from place to place, and how kids just get stolen, and that they just shut down their adoption. And then I talked about Guatemala and how that is just not a good spot to be in. This is close to my heart, so it's been a pleasure for me to talk to you guys about it. Thank you.